Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote I picked just for this episode. I'm indebted to my father for living, but to my teacher for living well. Alexander the Great. My dear friend Darius Mirshazadeh is here, back again from episode 116 and 106. If you haven't listened to those episodes on the Culture Matters podcast, very different experience than will be today. Listen to those episodes. Darius, author of the Core Value Equation, authority within various spaces. One we're about to dive into today as it relates to the art of making money in one sense. But Darius is an avid reader, teacher, pundit, and good friend of the Culture Matters podcast. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, and I should have added, I mean, how could I not say this? The Greatness Machine. We got to give a shout out to that podcast.
The Greatness is I was thinking about this morning. I'm like that's just like it's like it's my hobby. And I was like, I would say I'm collecting conversations in that thing. So it's the one thing I've always been a collector, but I haven't collected in a while. It's my new thing I'm collecting. So
what what have you learned this year from that collection, right? Of all these unbelievable people that you're coming into contact with.
Yeah, it's sorry, my audio cut out. Because ask the question one more time.
Yeah, like what have you learned from collecting all these great people? In the last year, even through the Greatness Machine.
Yeah, well, first of all, I realized that there's a thread that kind of connects extraordinary people, right? And that I resonate with. And a lot of that's around humility and curiosity and willing to take risk and chances. And I think when you combine all those things with not taking yourself too seriously or obsessing about what the world's going to think about you, it's that's kind of the name of the show is The Greatness Machines. People live their passions to create greatness in the world, and I've learned a lot more about what that means. I mean, when I created the show, I think I fully didn't understand it, and for myself or even for for the listeners. And what's happened is I've seen that there's this common thread, and there's folks that have come on the show that I don't think have maybe reached that point in their life. They're still in that got to prove I'm worth something mode. And it's interesting when someone's trying to achieve greatness because of the love of the game versus trying to achieve greatness because they want to prove they're valuable. It's very different. And so that's probably been my biggest epiphany.
Wow. Let's say a listener is, they're in one of those camps. How could one, figure out which one they are right now? You know what I'm saying? Right now, if you're listening to this, go look in the mirror and ask, and you're going to see this, and then you're going to know, are you doing it for the love or are you doing it for something else?
Yeah, I think that the easiest way, at least I look at it, is and is where is it coming from? Or is it coming from a place of passion? Like I'm enjoying the process of let's look at it from an artistic standpoint. Okay. Am I enjoying the process of creating the art? Or do I only enjoy it if someone tells me how great it is? I think it's as simple as that. Am I waiting for the clicks and the likes? And I do. Look, we all fall victim to this. I mean, at least unless you're Buddha and you're enlightened. The ego wants to be fed, right? So you're fighting the ego all the time. And so, I mean, yesterday I interviewed Moby, right? And it's for people that don't know who Moby is. He's the guy's like a world famous. He's a star. Yeah. I mean, I didn't realize how many amazing songs. I mean, I was a fan of his. I just forgot how many great songs he had. I mean, this guy's collaborated with Gwen Stefani and toured with Bowie and like Red Hot Chili Peppers. Like this guy's like he's like a legitimate like musical star, and he's 56, 57 now. He was probably at the height of his career 16, 17 years ago, maybe a little bit. Yeah, probably in the early 2000s.
Yeah, that makes sense. As I remember Eminem doing a thing on him, and like I followed Eminem.
Yeah, so I said to him on the show, I said, you've made it in life when you perform at the closing ceremonies of the Winter Olympics and have Eminem talk shit on you in the same year, and that was 2000. That was 2002. So I mean, like literally, I said that to him, and so like yeah, like this is a guy that's like achieved some major stuff, and so he had all the trappings of success, and he struggled with it. He and it was different than now because social media was in its infancy then. It was social networking then, so you didn't have the likes and the YouTubes and the Instagrams or anything like that. You had traditional media be like that was kind of your measuring stick. And he, the guy essentially became a drug addict and alcoholic because he was trying to like numb himself out, and he overcame that. And so we had a really interesting conversation around like the Hungry Ghost, which is are you familiar with Hungry Ghost?
I think I've heard of it, but I don't know that. What can you unpack that for me and the listeners?
Yeah, so if you look at like Taoism or Buddhism, the most major religions have some sort of concept around this demon, if you will, known as the Hungry Ghost, which is really like the ego at its worst. And it's this, like in Buddhism, that you could Google like Hungry Ghost and you'll see this like demon with it's like a big gut and like a big mouth and like a small neck, and it has an insatiable appetite.
Wow.
Right. And so I had an experience once where my Hungry Ghost appeared in front of a good friend of mine who's like kind of a spiritual mentor, and he told me, he's like, I see your Hungry Ghost right now. And it was the first time I had actually like heard the term and seen it, and it was this rabid wanting more. Right. So whenever you hear like there's I can't remember, it was like from a movie, it was like Wall Street or something, and like, what's enough? And he's like, well, how much is enough? I think it was like Wall Street with Michael Douglas and the original Wall Street. And he goes, what's his face? Charlie Sheen. He goes, how much is enough? What's enough? And he goes, how much do you need? And he goes, I need more. Right.
Holy shit.
And so if more is always the answer, then you'll never enjoy the process. Right. You'll never enjoy what you have. And I've been getting into Stoicism lately, and I'm reading Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday, which is a great book. And I'm gonna butcher this right now, and I'm really bad with quotes, but there's essentially this like, there's three different types of like lives you can live. One is, people that don't need much, right? They have enough, right? And they're grateful for what they have. And that's like the best life you can have, right? And then there's people that, are not grateful for what they have, right? But they have, and they'll never have enough. And that's a miserable life, And then there's a person that has it's a person that has everything and it's not enough. And that's the definition of like misery, right? You can never be satisfied. So like that's a miserable life. And I think that it's a thing where people think that when I get X, I call it the biggest lie in the world. When I get X, Y will happen. And the one thing I think I've learned is that, happiness is an inside job. They talk about that in AA, not that I've been in AA, but it's a big thing in AA, which because a lot of people they're numbing themselves out with alcohol or drugs or whatever, because they feel like they're less than. And so I was listening the other day. It was like a video I saw on social from Jim Carey. And if you haven't, do you follow him at all?
No, I don't. No.
He's like a modern day philosopher, man. Like if you start listening to his Yeah, it's really interesting. He did. You could go look up like YouTube on YouTube. He did the commencement speech at Maharishi University, which is the Transcendental Meditation University. But he does a commencement speech. He's a practicing, I think Buddhist. Um, but the guy's like, he's a really interesting guy. Obviously he's like a world famous comedian and actor. I grew up on him, so he was on a TV show called In Living Color. Do you know anything about him?
The Mask,
So the mask
right?
was when he actually was like a movie star. But before he did the mask, he did like a movie called Ace Ventura Pet Detective. You know any of this stuff? You're a
Yes, I
little
do know that one.
you're a little younger. And he did a movie called Dumb and
Oh,
Dumber.
Liar Liar is one of my favorites.
Yeah, so it's what made him famous though was Ace Ventura Pet Detective. That was his first big breakout role, and it was like this low budget comedy that like blew up. And this is like the mid '90s, and I was in high school I was like this like goofy kid who loved sophomore humor, and this was like a bullseye for that type of humor. But prior to that, he was on a TV show called In Living Color, which is actually where he became famous for the first time, like publicly famous. And In Living Color was a competitor to Saturday Night Live, and it was on Fox, and Saturday Night Live was on NBC, and literally it was a straight up competitor. And he was like there was an ensemble cast, like the Damon Wayans was on it, the Wayans brothers created the
Wow.
show. Tommy, gosh, what's his name? There's a lot of people on there. Like if you go in there and look, you're like, oh, I recognize those actors. And there had this little known guy named Jim Carey that was one of the actors on the show. Nobody knew who he was, but he had all these crazy characters that became super famous in the 90s. And then from that, it led to him doing movies. And then from that, and he was a stand-up comedian before this. And then he
Wow.
became world famous. Now he's like a painter and he does all this stuff, right? And so he's being interviewed online. This is like a few months ago, and he's retiring from acting.
Really?
Yeah, he's retiring. He's like legitimately retiring. And I can't remember who it was. It was like Dolly Parton was talking to this woman on like Entertainment Weekly, and she's like, I want Jim Carrey to play one of the parts of somebody in her life story movie. And he said, oh, I'm retiring, to the woman in the interview. And he's like, look, you're gonna hear me say something that I would be surprised if you ever heard another celebrity say this. He's like, but I have enough. I've had a great life and I have enough, and I don't need to go get more right now. And so it was funny. I talked with Moby about that. So when's enough creatively? And so it goes back to this, if you start looking at stoicism is around a discipline of life, right? To create, but why should we live a disciplined life and a life of stillness and, try to soothe our soul? And it comes down to like the Stoics were like these like warriors, warrior princes, kings, thought leaders, philosophers, and they were doing the same shit we're doing right now. They were trying to figure out how to live a good life. Right.
It's crazy when you think of it like that.
Yeah, right. And then you
They're
start
doing the
looking.
same shit.
So it's funny. Like I'm a person that over the last, what's it, 2023 now, over the last 5 years, I went from running as hard as I could on the hedonic treadmill to realizing that there's probably a better way. And I had ran on the hedonic treadmill for a really, really long time. And it took a really big change in my life. And essentially I tell folks I just hit rock bottom personally. And so, in doing that, it caused me to, reflect on like, how am I living and what type of life am I trying to live if I'm trying to, create greatness in the world? And going back to the original question, because this is kind of a long-winded answer, is I've learned that, especially with interviewing a lot of people, that there's this perspective around, am I creating for me, or am I creating from a place of of living my values and being better? And am I creating from a place of showing up in the world the way I want to show up? Or am I doing it because I'm waiting for the accolade or the award? And I gave up on the latter. For the most part. I'm not, I mean, I'm a recovering hedonic treadmill runner. So I have my moments, but now I have an awareness around it. So I'll catch myself doing it. I'll see it. I'll see the behavior. I'll see like, oh, here I am again doing that. No, I'm not going to do that.
You think there's a value for the listeners to start even their own show to learn more about themselves in the world? Or is it just too much work to try to figure that out?
I think there's easier ways of figuring it out. Starting a show is, I mean, as you know, is work.
It is work.
It's work. I mean, like it's another thing to manage.
A lot of people quit.
Yeah, it's another thing to manage. So I would not do it for this. I don't think you need to do that for that. For me, I'm a learner, and I'm super social, and I like to meet cool people, and I like to, I guess where we started this conversation, like I've realized I like to collect conversations. And so like the perfect, thing for that is probably podcast. If you're listening to what I just said and you're like, I want to learn more about myself, but I don't want to do all that, then I'm like, why don't you just journal? Like I would ask myself tough questions like, hey, and like, this is a great quote. I just finished a book called The American, was it? No, this was from Stillness is Key. I finished another book called The American Drug Addict, which was pretty entertaining.
Oh, I got to read that.
That's like, it was an interesting book. But what would happen if you got everything you wanted? What would happen if so you start thinking about the thing you're working on, and a lot of us work on something with a future state in mind, right? So I'm building a business. Oh, I'm going to build it and I'm going to sell it for X number of dollars. And when that happens, I'm going to go live on the beach. Great. Sounds great, right? Like everything I just said sounds great to the unknowing ear.
Interesting.
Right? You know what I thought of when I finished that sentence?
What?
I thought, that sounds super fucking boring. Not the part of building something and selling it, the part about going and living on the beach.
Well, yeah, it would be so boring after a couple.
Yeah, that's
margaritas.
Yeah, that's boring. Like after 2 weeks, that would be boring for me. Why?
Or go ahead. Sorry, I have no question.
Because there's no purpose. What's your purpose then? My purpose is to fucking hang out on the beach. That sounds really boring to me. So again, like play out the outcome. What would happen if you got everything you wanted? And I was like, oh, this is so good. Like, I'm actually going to do a podcast on this. I wrote it down. I'm like, oh, this is a really good podcast. Because I think most people don't go into, I think when we're sitting here striving to build something, we don't think what would happen when I get what I want. Because I think here's the reality. You're going to want something else once you get that. That's the answer, by the way. There is never a destination you will ever get to. At least my belief is this. There is never a destination that it's worth bleeding over, that because when you get there, you will feel a different way, or because when you get there, you will be a changed person. That's not how change happens. And that's not life. Think of every single thing you've ever wanted that you got. What happened when you got there? You did not feel the same way you felt when you first wanted it. Nobody on earth.
And likely even down.
Like, you probably were disappointed.
A little depressed.
You probably maybe disappointed, maybe depressed, or if you're me, which was this realization I had, is I'm like, I didn't even celebrate when I hit my achievements. I would just raise the bar and move on to the next goal. And so I realized that's just kind of part of my personality, is there is no celebration of the achievement. So then you start questioning, well, then why should I achieve? And the answer I concluded was, there's nothing wrong with achieving, but to achieve with the intention of that I will be different once I achieve is the wrong intention. To achieve because that is the outcome that transpires by me showing up to live my best life is a way better way to live, because every day I get to win. Every day I get to win. Every day I get to achieve my goals. Every day I get to hit those targets. And tomorrow I get to wake up and do it all over again. And and for me, it went from having this really like broad view that I'm at point A, and when I get to point Z, life will be different. And I went and I totally flipped that on its head. I'm like, that's done. This is a realization I had probably, I don't know, in March. So
Darius, do you think there's something there, like the other version of that, or the other, okay, that idea of I do this to get this, it's I have to do this. What you just said was I get to wake up tomorrow and be this person. Like there's that I have to versus I get to kind of dichotomy. I don't know. It just sounded like that when I was listening to what you were saying.
Yeah, I never felt like I had to do before. I didn't feel that way, so I never ever felt. I always like was fired up about coming in and building, but I never enjoyed the process of it. And sometimes
you just like you would grit your teeth, or you had like what do you call it, discipline or grit?
Yeah, strong discipline, strong grit. But here's what I realized: I only enjoyed it when I was winning. I would double down on grinding when I wasn't winning. And it was a mixture of love and hate. I would sell myself on the fact of, hey, I'm sacrificing for for when I hit point Z. And I realized that's wrong. Not to say you shouldn't sacrifice. I sacrifice all the time. But sacrificing because I'll use an example. Right now, I'm building a private equity company, and I'm having to rebuild these models. And I'm not great at rebuilding models, and we just don't have a CFO yet. We don't have a quant type person yet on the team, and I'm kind of like the go-to person for that. Now, I'm a capable person who's like, but that's not my it takes me time to do it, and it's not my. I always had CFO and team that would do that stuff.
Makes
so
sense.
Like I will sacrifice, meaning like, yeah, it's a startup. Like we don't have a person for that. And like, I don't have time to go find someone like, cause I need it now. So I will make the sacrifice to do it, even though it's going to be slower. It's going to take me more time. It's going to wear me out a little bit, but I don't hate the process of doing it. I'm sacrificing, meaning I'm going to go work on Saturday and get it done because it needs to get done. And I actually don't mind the process when I'm doing it. But I do know it's coming at a cost of me spending time with my family a little bit, of me maybe taking some personal time, of me working instead of working what I want to work, which is more like 50 hours a week. I'm working more like 70 hours a week right now. That's a sacrifice. I don't hate the process. I like working. So, but I know that me working 70 versus 50, I'll do it temporarily in this season because it's important for me to build what I want to build. And it's not because I want. I know that in the past I would have sold myself on when I build this private equity company, I'm going to turn it into a multi-billion-dollar fund, and that's why I need to sacrifice now. Now, everything is actually the same as what I said. I am building a private equity firm with the intention of it becoming a multi-billion-dollar equity firm, but I do not think like, oh, that has to happen or else I won't be happy. I think I got to show up and be my best self and build something I'm proud of, and enjoy the process of doing that. And if I show up and do that every single day, that a potential outcome is what I just said. But my goal is to show up and be proud of the work I do every day. That's it. With the intention of not burning myself out in the long run. The short run, I got a lot of stamina. I can go pretty hard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that first of all, I think not only does it make sense, like what a profound realization.
Yeah, it took time to get there. You know, it took a lot of pain actually to get there. And so it's funny now that I'm here, I'm more really observant of folks that were where I used to be. And I'm like, I'm like, I hope they figure it out, because I know, and the world incentivized, the world feeds the hedonic machine, right?
Mm.
Hey, you're Inc. 5000 CEO. Yay. Hey, even yesterday, hey, I mean, like I posted online that I interviewed Moby and I got a ton of attaboys, right? And I checked my Facebook 15 times to see how many likes I got. So I'm admitting something that's embarrassing right now. And the whole time I did it, I was like, why am I doing this? Now, but at least I questioned it. The win for me was that I questioned doing it.
Why? Why is that so important for the listeners to think through?
Because me caring that people care is defeats what I just said. I should be the only one that cares. Now, I will tell you, dude, it is super fucking cool to interview Moby. That is a cool thing to do. Like
Very cool.
Objectively, that's really cool, right?
Hard to argue.
And so,
Hard to
argue. I was like, man, this is cool. I want to share it with people because it's like I'm so I just think that's just such a cool thing to have done, and like, and I want, and I'm a social
inspiring
person.
Too.
Yeah, and like people who have watched me on my journey build the show, like just to get them to see that this is where the show's at now. I'm like,
but maybe what you're alluding to is that the order matters, because essentially we have to aspire, we have to hope. It transfers values. You have a strong character, clearly, like you've accomplished something.
Totally.
Like I was thinking when you were talking, I was thinking, okay, where's the entitlement here? I don't hear it. Meaning you're saying there's all these things that got to get done. We don't have someone to do it right now. I'm going to do it. It's like, whoa, there's no entitlement there. Like, I like Darius. I knew I liked you already, but like, damn, dude, like I could rely on you. I'd want to go into a fight with you, you know?
Yeah, I'd want to go into a fight with me.
Yeah, like you're about to go into a fight, and then the guy, like, you got two guys with you, and one of them kind of ducks out in the corner. I mean, don't we see this in business?
Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah.
Like,
there's plenty of people. I actually think loyalty is a gift, right? So I think what you're talking about is loyalty. That's at least what I just heard.
Well, how can someone be loyal if they don't have a level of, like, what is it? Skin in their own game, maybe, is where you're going with this at some level. Like,
I think that I think that it depends. I think that there are people that get that. I think loyalty is a gift. I think some people give it more freely than others. Some people, it's part of their identity, so they're just more willing to do it. And some people, it's part of their integrity, and so they're more willing to do it. So, and by the way, when you find those people, treasure them, because that's hard to find. I used to, when I hear people say I demand loyalty, I like kind of like cringe, or I'm like, what are you, fucking Tony Soprano? Like that's, by the way, fuck face, that's a fucking TV show. So like that's not real life. Like it's just not like you didn't sign a blood oath. You're not in the mafia. Like no, if you expect that, like don't be disappointed when you get disappointed. And that was a learning I had, because I used to, I'm a giver. I'm a very loyal person, and I give loyalty pretty freely. My brother's the same way. I think it's just part of our family. We're like that. I think it's kind of in our DNA. And I remember when it didn't get reciprocated by people that I expected it from, because I was so giving with it to these folks, that I was really hurt by it. And I was young when this happened. It was my first company I had that I was very loyal to my team, and I gave freely to them, honestly, more than I would now ever consider giving to them. And I gave too much. And people could question what that means, but I've learned a lot. And what I learned was that don't give if you expect don't give for the reason of expecting something in return. That is the wrong, that's not a gift, right? That's not being loyal. That's like a transaction. And I had sold myself on that being loyalty, when down deep I was expecting it in return. And so I don't do that anymore. I give because I want to give. Yeah, I'm disappointed sometimes when people don't give back. But then I go, that's on them. Like, I would be a person that, if I was hanging out with me, I would give freely. I would give a lot to me because I'm a loyal person who's very giving and who has a lot to give. And so I would want that relationship with me. And if someone doesn't get that, it's like that's actually a liability for them. That's a cost. They just lost a pretty good opportunity with me.
Do you think that giving nature, that loyal nature, that willingness to work to get shit done is part of why this is so exciting, this venture into the private equity space? Because essentially, if we're thinking about it, we're taking business from A to Z to D, to Z, like better. Things are supposed to be better after. I'm curious what you think about that. If it's kind of like a perfect combination of.
Yeah, I think it just fits my personality pretty well. So as you know, I came from the mortgage space, and I think the mortgage space from a values perspective does not fully align with the way I am with my constitution. No offense to there's plenty of amazing people in the space. Don't get me wrong. The people themselves are. The industry itself, not the people. The actual fundamental framework of how the industry is built in a way that I am not aligned with personally. It is a value misalignment. And so I will explain what I mean. And this has nothing to do with the people. It has to do with the incentive systems that the industry has been built on based off of capital markets. And I think private equity can have some of those. And I actually think the private equity is changing right now.
Interesting. We got to unpack that. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So let me explain the mortgage industry first, because it was something that was the reason I ended up stepping down as CEO of TMS. Was I was like, for the first time in my life, I had this realization that the industry is not aligned with my values. And when I say the industry, it's not the people. I don't want people who are in it to say like, fuck you, Darius. It's not. The people are amazing. I actually I love they're as amazing as they are in any other industry. All of them, the leaders too. But the industry is built on a securitization model that incentivizes transactions, right?
Interesting.
It incentivizes not having an abundance mindset. It incentivizes taking at someone else's expense. It incentivizes because the way people get paid, they get paid in the here and now. And it incentivizes, and you have everything at stake in the transaction on the front end and on the back end.
Wow. So
what do I mean by that? I'm a loan originator. So I'm a loan officer. If I'm a listener who's not in the mortgage industry, like you go do a loan with somebody. When they close that loan, they get a full-blown, they get 100% of that commission up front. They don't get paid out over the life of your relationship by making payments. You, by the way you create value as a homeowner is you make payments every month. So it's a 30-year loan. You make payments every single month, 360 payments. Some of that goes to interest. Some of that goes to principal. And there's a bondholder on the other end of it who gets incentivized by the interest they make. That bondholder pays the originator, the broker, the lender up front for the economic value they're going to get over the life of that investment. So the person who's doing the loan, they're incentivized to close that deal now. That's the only incentive they get. And then after that, the only other incentive they'll get is by doing that loan again at some point in the future. By the way, when they do that loan again at some point in the future, they're taking that loan away from who they sold it to and potentially giving it to someone else, thereby hurting the economic value of the person that paid for it the first time. Typically, the person paying for it the first time pays 5 points for it. So on a $100,000 loan, they pay $5,000 for that loan, right? Well, you don't have to be a mathematician to know that and let's say it's 5% interest. On a $100,000 loan, 5% interest is $5,000 a year. So for the first year, they don't even make their money back. They break even on it because there's usually there's transaction costs, right? They don't just get it, and it costs them money to buy that loan.
Yeah, nothing's free, no free lunch.
So literally for 1 year they break even, and then so they don't even start making money until year 2. Okay. So I just gave kind of a simple example for the listeners. What does that mean? That means that the originators, the lenders, the brokers are all incentivized to make money now, right now. And the person they sell it to is incentivized to make sure that no one ever takes that loan away from them. So you have this like really almost like from a primal perspective, this like lack of abundance. It's like, this is mine. And because it all sits on top of the foundation of interest rate movement, you have that moves around a lot. You have it's like living on Earth, but there's earthquakes every hour, every minute.
That's a, yeah.
Right. So you have a house that has to move with that, or else the house falls down. So by the way, who the house are people. So as if you run a shop, and especially at scale, that means you're always adding people and firing people, which dilutes the culture of the business. And if the business is an organism of the entire industry, you have an entire industry made up of 4,000 of these organisms, because there's about 4,000 lenders and probably another 4,000 brokers, plus God knows how many banks, 4,000 banks too. So you got about 12,000 participants at the institutional level. Those 12,000 participants are incentivized highly, because they get paid up front, to add bodies as quickly as humanly possible when rates go down, and to shed those bodies as fast as humanly possible as rates go up. Well, what does that mean? That means you have this completely fractured culture in every little organization because of the rate movement that happens, and because of the transactional nature of how people get paid. So if each one of those 12,000 institutions are constantly going up and down, and they're part of the organism of 12,000 institutions, those 12,000 institutions make up a body that is essentially schizophrenic and bipolar. Super, super, super bipolar and super schizophrenic. And I was a leader of a couple of those organizations and CEO of a couple of them. And that was my life. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I'm just like most of our listeners, I'm a person that I connect with humans and I build relationships, and I'm a loyal person. As I said before, I'm naturally a loyal person. So to have to like add and cut and add and cut and add and cut, and it's transaction, so it's I got to take from you. It wore me down. And I just like I had this moment where I'm like, I think the humans themselves are who I'm connected with. Like, they're amazing people, but the fundamental makeup of how this is, the design of this business is not aligned with me personally. And I tapped out after 20 years. And then I went and coached and advised a bunch of companies and watched them go through it. And it's the same deal. And so, I can't remember how this conversation started, but my realization was that there's probably for me, at least personally, there's probably a better fit from a values perspective as far as industry. And I think it's really important for listeners to like take a hard look at their industry and say like, hey, does the fundamental makeup of how people are paid and how the industry operates align with who I am as a human? I was talking to my brother about this the other day, and I said, because now I'm moving into the wealth management space on the private equity side. And I was like, I said, my gosh, this is so aligned with who I am as a human. Just like it's everything that we just talked about, except it's different. The way you get paid in a wealth management firm is you get paid as you make your clients money over the long run. Completely up. So I always said, if you want to fix the mortgage industry, make it where everyone only gets paid as customers make payments. We didn't even get into the servicing side of the business, right? But if every loan officer was incentivized because they only got their commission over a 30-year period, 1 month at a time. By the way, that's how the insurance business pays, and that's how the wealth management business pays. You would have a much more stable business.
And weren't banks at one time, they would keep their loans on their actual books?
Yeah, I think that there's a value
of the culture.
Well, I think yes, that there was that
back in the old days, like
before there was like a huge securitization market. Yes, but I actually think you could change. I actually think you could fix that too. I think I think the securitization market's fine. It creates more liquidity, which makes it more competitive for the assets, which drives the interest rates down. I don't have an issue with that part of it. But I agree with you. Back in the day, there was a relationship, because you had a relationship with you would have walked in, you had to physically get up and walk into the bank, sit down with the person that was going to give you the loan and take the loan from him. And it was a guy whose kid you played t-ball with.
Yeah.
and you'd see them, and oh, they probably did your banking too. So there was a massive relationship there. So you weren't going to like rate goes down. First of all, if the rates went down, you had to get up, drive in your car, walk into the bank, sit down with the person whose kid you play t-ball with, who does your banking as well, and tell them that you wanted to refinance your loan away from them.
Interesting.
You weren't going to do that, right? You were going to probably ask them to refi your loan, right? So fundamentally,
You're right. There's a less likelihood that it would be like almost cheating on your partner in a sense. I mean, that's a bit extreme, but you're less likely to like.
Yeah, I mean, like it's you have
to go face to face and tell them you don't like them. Maybe.
Yeah,
It's not that serious of a relationship. Like when you're starting to date somebody.
Totally.
And it's easier to just kind of I'll just not respond to this person anymore because like you went on 2 dates. That's kind of where I think.
Yeah, I think it's a little hyperbole, but hyperbolic, right? But it's spot on. And so for me, I looked at this other thing, and so first of all, for our mortgage listeners, because I know you have some mortgage listeners, I think if you want to fix the mortgage industry, you make it where the securities, where they basically float down that you get a float down option within the security to 2 things needs to happen. There's a float down option within the security so that at any time, if rates drop by X%, I can press the button and I get the lower rate. So I don't ever leave the security. What that does is that eliminates refinancing. Now, my listeners are like, what do you mean no refinancing? I said, hey, this isn't what's best for the fucking loan officer, by the way. I'm not trying to fix their life. And by the way, in order to make that work, you stop paying people up front for the loan. You pay them over the life of the loan. So they get their commission over 30 years every month. If you did those 2 changes, I believe the mortgage industry would go from the brutal fucking gnarly existence that it is into, I think, one of the best industries in the world.
Wow.
I don't have the energy to go and try to make that change happen. I actually think blockchain.
Are you running for office? No, I love the passion though. Ultimately, what I like most that aligns with the podcast is, I mean, these are thoughts, like these are original ideas, is what it sounds like. I haven't heard anyone say that. So I think in the spirit of the show, like uncovering genius, like you clearly thought about this quite a bit.
Well, I was just like, because it was something that ate at me, right? And I was like, you know what? If you want to fix the industry, you got to pay everyone over the 30 years. And because now the services are aligned with the originators who are aligned with the loan officers. And if you did all that,
just before we go into or maybe this is part of like a investment, the general thesis is, do you think it's part of the reason some of the larger institutions started to conglomerize to try to hedge themselves?
Ask the question.
Like, I'll say it this way. Let's say that there's this inherent reactivity will occur where we're going to have to decrease our population and then rapidly increase our population. And we both agree, I'm in agreement with you, that's going to lower trust. Because if my neighbor is all of a sudden sent to a camp, I'm going to think it's me next. If I get just because I get someone new in the house that was next door to me, I don't know them, right? So up and down, up and down, up and down, that does create a psychological toll on people, just like it would to somebody pulling that lever, even if they weren't aware of it. So let's say you're saying the incentive systems are creating that dynamic or part of that dynamic. So in theory, an organization could attempt to figure out how to generate capital from other mediums to essentially be able to like increase the burn rate to weather the storm, to not lose the great people. That's generally a business, conflict generally, but I'm just curious if you think that's where things could go. Because let's say that, you don't get the ability to they don't change the system, right? Like, how are these companies going to adapt? I'm just curious. That just came to mind when we were talking.
Honestly, I don't think that I don't think that that's what change is going to happen. Yes, I agree with you. You could try to do that. I think that it's still too lopsided because you make too much money on a loan, and these other income streams they're not strong enough. But yes, you could potentially do like a Dan Gilbert rocket, company of rockets.
Like, do you think that he, like, maybe not him? Well, I don't know him at all. But maybe that's like there's those, like, maybe that could be some of the inspiration behind it. The ones that are going to be in the game a long time. They're trying to figure out ways around these things.
I don't know what the intention was there. I think it's more of just being entrepreneurial, and and seeing these vertical opportunities and or venture opportunities and them taking advantage of it. I think if I had to guess, I would guess that. I don't think it's going to get fixed because I think there's way too much greed involved with people making money now, and people are animals that like instant gratification. And if people did the right thing for the long term, we would have a way different political system, and we'd have a way different capitalistic system as a whole. I do think that there's conscious leaders out there that are trying to fix these things, and some are making more headway than others. I honestly think blockchain is going to be the disruption that changes all this. Because it creates a natural ledger. You can house the asset, you can move the asset without a human involved algorithmically. Wow. And if I had to guess, if someone wants to record me saying this, which is you, and if we can pull this up 15 years from now, my guess is the entire origination world that we see will not look the way it looks. The only reason it would be because stodgy regulators do not allow the change to happen. So maybe it's 30 years from now, but I don't think that I'm 45 years old. When I'm 75 years old, I do not think the mortgage industry will exist in any semblance of its current formation.
It's interesting, isn't that like the old idea? Not maybe that what is it? Innovation reinvigorates values, or
Yeah. I'm a little cynical, maybe. I think that there are some people that do it for that reason. I think most people do it for capitalistic reasons. And
so I'm in agreement with that. So let's say the intention is that, but in spite of that, the outcome or the fruit just makes the next generation a bit better.
Yeah. Look, man, like I think innovation drives the world, right? And
like Churchill, we shape our houses, and then they shape us.
Interesting. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. Look, I think people naturally want peace and happiness in their life, and systems that are not designed to do that, I think, get optimized out. Leaders that are not that don't optimize for that are eventually optimized out. You show me every leader that created chaos, and I show you someone that was optimized out at some point, whether their system was optimized out or they themselves were optimized out. Go down the list, and you show me someone that was steadfast in creating stability.
Yeah.
Because it inherently, biologically, we want safety and peace.
Would you say that a leader has to, or is called to, create that stability for their people, so they don't optimize them the hell out?
In the long run, it's in their best interest. In the short run, I think the incentives, you're a Munger fan. So you show me someone's incentives, I'll show you their behavior, right? Or it's Charlie Munger 101, right? And I love Munger. I just think the incentive systems are so too lopsided in favor of short-term thinking. And this is when I look at our entire society and say, and I have a mentor, Rand Stagen, that he uses the term long-termism. And I just think that our incentive systems are not built for that. So I think you need to redesign if you want to redesign people's behavior, you have to redesign their incentive systems. And right now they're not designed
it's interesting. You think what comes to mind is part of the reason incentive systems are so important is it takes it takes something unique, something hard to even articulate. Let's say you have a group of people, you have 10 people, 20 people, 50 people, whatever. One may question the incentive. Like there'll be that one. But if that one then gains the admiration of the many, they'll be in power, and power corrupts. And then so then that one that is in power ends up, succumbing to a future incentive. Like they stop thinking. It's like the reason incentives are so important is because of our thoughtlessness. Like we thinking, breaks down in groups. So it's just thinking just is very difficult to do. So the incentives shape us. And there may be one person like yourself, even in this conversation, that's thinking, quote unquote, outside the box.
Yeah.
And I would go so far to say that that's one of the values of the whether it's the mentor or the advisor, that external, in this case, that we're going down this path to dialogue today around the equity investments, that external partner, they create open feedback loops with the naturally occurring closed feedback loops of the person in a position of power in the frame that was once thoughtful that is now not thinking. So like the incentive structures create thoughtlessness. Someone will question it. That's the leader. They'll then get power. They'll stop thinking until they have Darius telling them externally, right? Hey, dude, or, hey, ma'am, you're whacked out of the mind, right? That's the value of the external consultant, whatever. And then equities in the private space, capital allocation is kind of in that line of we're externally looking over and saying, you thought once, now you're not thinking again.
Mm-hmm.
That's because I do believe the power corrupts, absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. I do believe that, but it's proportional to the character of the individual, and like you said in the beginning, that the Buddha thing, like, yeah, we're not Gandhi or Buddha, right? So anyway, like I just kind of segueing to where what it is that you're providing to the marketplace now as a former operator in another sector and now an operator in this sector in a different context. I think it kind of all ties together. It's like the incentives create thoughtlessness because it's following a structure of a previous thought. A leader will question bad incentives in their view. They'll get power. And with power comes thoughtlessness because it's based on the past. And they'll need to think through new things, which is where the external mentor, advisor, private equity partner comes in. I see, like there's this beautiful symphony that happens with equities that gets me excited, like, going to the earlier in the conversation, if I got cancer today, I'd be showing up for the next, session. Like, I just do the same thing I'm doing right now. Like, I love this, right?
Yeah. So here's what I think.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Like the symphony of business and how it ties into private,
so I think that smart leaders go and find that themselves. I think that's how it actually works in reality right now. Is smart leaders know that they need help and coaching and mentorship, and the ones that are, and like we have a mutual friend, Eddie Perez, who's like a coach, getting coached athlete. We both advise him. And he's like on the far end of the spectrum of that. I think that's the exception by far, like massive exception. I think the norm is probably on the other side, which is people just try to, they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know how to figure it out. And I think that the top performers, the Pareto's principle, the 20% figure out that they need help and they go out there and seek it, whether that's through peer groups or coaching or investors or advisors, you name it. And so I'm a little cynical on the business side just because I've been in it for a long time. I had a realization. I've been an entrepreneur for 25 years now, and I'm 45 years old. And it's actually 26 years because I started my first time I ever spent money to try to make money was I was 19. And you got to spend money to make money, right? So I was 19, I was sophomore in college, was the first time I put money on the line in a
Mhm.
business and bought leads to try to sell some multi-level marketing product that I got suckered into buying. And so yeah, I'm a little cynical of that. I agree with as far as it being institutionalized. I think that smart leaders know that they don't know what they don't know, and go and seek to learn that. And I would tell you that in general, I think it's probably depends on what circles you're swimming in, but the more elite circles you swim in, the more you see people out there seeking what you're talking about.
I've never thought of this in the visual the way that I just did from this conversation. It's a total testament to the power of camaraderie, the pursuit of truth, curiosity, the things that you were talking about. Like when we get together, we have these ideas, as you say, like ideation. I love that word. Like I've never thought of it this clearly. Where like if you have a group of people, no one's thinking because they're basing their action based on concepts already preconceived. But one person may question it and say, no, man, we got to do it this way. They become the leader. They then get everyone to follow them, whereas they were just a follower before. And now they're corrupt implicitly because they have power, meaning they once thought, now they're not thinking. And then what is that a call for? It's a call for the advisor, the mentor, the person that's not in the system to look at them, right? It's the call for, we need Darius and his team to be our partner in this registered investment advisory, because we ironically are not going to be good advisors to ourselves because we advise other people.
Yeah, so I think that again, I think smart leaders, enlightened leaders know what they don't know, and they go seek counsel, right? And
yeah, they seek it. Is that like a humility thing? That's the question, right?
I think
is it necessary for
some
humility? Like there has to be a character thing there.
Yeah, I think again, I think it's just yes. I think that that's part of it. I think that it's in their best. Like my bias is that's in their best interest because you only know what you know. But look, there's plenty of successful people I know who are autocrats, who know everything, who, are from at least a standpoint of like what society would consider successful or super, super successful. I look at them and I think, what a disappointment. Why? So because not because I see that they lack humility, that they know it all, and despite that, they've built something of significance. Probably because there's something in there that's giving them some energy to go and prove people wrong, and do what we do when we're building sometimes, especially when we're less enlightened. And then I think, man, what value could they bring to the world if they had that level of talent, with that level of arrogance? What would happen if they actually had humility on top of it, and went out there and learned and seek knowledge and collaborated? That person could probably create 10x the value they've already created. So I'm just a person that thinks that there's a 10x opportunity there that's being completely missed. So for listeners who are like, man, he's talking kind of esoterically about this, I'll just give you hard numbers. Let's say you meet someone, they build $100 million business. You'd be like, that person's super fucking successful. Oh my God, they're incredible, right? But they, did it by themselves. They're grinders. They made a lot of mistakes. They found something that works. Half of success is fucking luck. Just FYI, it's staying in the game and being lucky. Because luck and unluck.
Not quitting.
Yeah, not quitting and just knowing that like sometimes you get fucking lucky. Just as much as you get unlucky, sometimes you also get lucky. So what does that mean? That means sometimes I get outsized returns that I don't deserve for the same effort as I always gave. And sometimes I get outsized punishment that I don't deserve for the same effort. Right. And so, but here's our negativity bias in life means that we kind of ignore. I believe we do this because of negativity bias. We ignore the failures. There's a saying, I think I've said this on your show before, is that, Success has many fathers and failures an orphan. I think that a lot of people, especially successful entrepreneurs, I think they're pretty good at forgetting their ignoring the negative side of their failures, trying to learn what they can to not do it again. They don't want to touch the hot stove again, but they kind of forget that it happened, right? And then going and trying to succeed, right? And so again, sometimes you get these outsized returns for the same effort. Does that mean you're smarter? Maybe. I would argue it meant that you were smart enough to stay in the game, knowing that sometimes you get outsized returns for the same effort, right? So let's go back to what I was saying before. Holistically speaking, you had $100 million entrepreneur. That person's so brilliant, but they don't seek help. They don't seek guidance. They don't seek advice. They don't want private equity to come in and be a partner with them. I look at that and go, what a disappointment. Going back to what I said earlier. Why did I say that? Because I don't see a $100 million entrepreneur. I see a $1 billion entrepreneur that's only living to 10% of their potential.
Interesting.
Right. So again, this is a full reframe, right? And again, a person that's running a $1 million company might look at that person and think that they're amazing. Someone like myself who's ran a couple $100 million companies, like, what a disappointment. Right? We're looking at the same person, by the way. Why? I have knowledge of what they're not doing. I know what they're not doing that I think they should be doing, because I know that if I go out and seek counsel from people smarter than me that have done more than I have, there's what's a Jim Rohn quote, what you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. If you're the most successful people out of all your friends, that's a problem. I want to be the biggest loser in the room. I make it a goal to be the biggest loser in the room as much as I possibly can. And I say that in jest, because I actually don't consider myself a loser at all. I think you're a winner if you can make yourself be the least enlightened, least knowledgeable, least experienced person in a room. What does that mean? That means I was at least smart enough for them to let me in the room.
Huh.
And then because I'm in that room, through osmosis, you will become those that you're in the room with, as long as you can stay in that room. And then and I look at that and I'm like, that's the game of business and life in my book. And FYI, people don't let you in that room unless they think you should be there. And if you want to get into the next room with the next group of people that it's going to look like, you got to earn it. And you got to earn it by bringing value to those rooms. So I just think that a lot of people get really comfortable being the biggest person in their room, and they stay in their room. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think that they're leaving money on the table. I think they're leaving opportunity on the table. I would be bored. Going back to our conversation, that sounds boring to me. That's like me cashing out and sitting on the beach.
Interesting.
I don't want to ever be the biggest guy in the room unless I'm teaching young people the shit that we're talking about, or inexperienced people. I don't mind being the biggest person in the room, teaching people this stuff. I do mind being the biggest person in the room because that's my crew, and I get to be the big swinging dick. Okay. That sounds boring. That sounds like a life not worth living, as far as I'm concerned.
For those that are completely oblivious of the industry that we're unpacking here, what is, for the lay beginner, private equity mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's straight up, it means money that's not coming from the public markets, that's investing in some sort of endeavor, right? Capitalistically or commercially, it's private money. Again, it could be coming through some sort of public institution into a private vehicle, but essentially it's a private vehicle. So if I put money in Wells Fargo stock, that's a public vehicle. If I put money in Darius LLC, that's a private vehicle. So it's money from different sources coming into a private vehicle that then gets deployed into the markets in various ways. The way I'm moving into private equity, where we are taking money, we're looking right now, we're doing a capital raise. So we're potentially raising a very large sum of money, about $250 million, to go.
If there's interest in inquiries, just, you got to tell them now, because we're going to go into the weeds intentionally here. Where would they talk to you?
I mean, yeah.
I guess maybe you can't even say that because it has to be accredited.
Not even that. We're not taking retail money. So
And how do you describe retail money before
retail
we go?
money is an accredited investor giving me money direct, investing 100 grand in our deal.
But I
So,
have a check right here. I'm just kidding.
well,
It's good. That's good. You
Yeah.
have a boundary of what you're not interested in moving forward. That's amazing.
Yeah, we'll do a carve out but I already have that kind of allocated to people that have committed to us before we went.
All right. So sorry. Listen, everyone listening to this. This is a learning opportunity. Not an investment opportunity.
So there's different ways of raising money. You can raise money directly from retail investors, which would be like you and me, or you could go to institutional investors, which would be other private equity or insurance companies or pension funds. But they're in the business of deploying a lot of capital because they need to make sure that they can pay their retirement funds out, and they don't care about 100 grand. They probably barely care about.
They got to do a lot.
They want to deploy 50, 100, 200, 300, 400 billion, stuff like that.
And is the idea they need boots on the ground of people that actually understand a sector or many, understand the nuances of business, have a track record and an ability to mitigate risk with their physical and mental beings on Main Street.
Yeah.
That's what you are.
Yeah. So I can't remember the numbers. I have a good friend, Chris Schelling. He wrote a book called Better Than Alpha. And
can I get that on Audible?
I don't know if he has it on Audible. Maybe. He's a brilliant guy.
I'll look it up.
Brilliant guy. He ran a $5 billion private equity fund for the teachers retirement system here in Texas. Now he's at a place, I think it's called, can't remember the name of it, Caprock or something like that. $8 billion family office. And so,
wow.
Yeah, stud guy. I love him. He's a super smart dude. But if you look, like, there's a lot of opportunity. Yeah, there you go. I know you're
talk about it. I just got this one.
I love that, man. And so he and I were talking about this, and he said, look, if you look at how many public companies are there out there? Like 3,000-4,000 of them, right?
Yeah, 30. Yeah, for almost four, about.
Yeah. So there's like 4,000 publicly traded companies out there. And there's for every one of and then I think there's
domestic in the US. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have this like ecosystem, and I'm making up numbers right now of like, I'm probably off, but let's just assume I'm not. 50,000 people who are analysts, ripping into those numbers, trying to like see where there's opportunity. This is why they say markets are efficient, even though they're not perfectly efficient, right? Because you have 4,000 companies and you got 50,000 people digging into those companies, right? So that creates an efficient market because you have enough people trying to figure out what's going on with these businesses. And because price moves consistently, people can make bets, and because it's an efficient market, information gets discovered fairly quickly. Private equity, it's let's use that same thought process. You have, call it, how many 10 million, $100 million, well, I already know the number, so let me pull it up. Let me just do the math here quickly. There are call it 15 million businesses in America.
Wow.
Right. And I think it's like 0.3% are over 100 million. So that's 4.5 million businesses. And that's 30%. Sorry. 450,000 of them.
Wow.
Are over 100 million.
Of the 15 million.
Yeah. So you have 450,000 $100 million businesses. I didn't even do $10 million businesses. I just did. So we could even do that. Let's do 10 million. 10 million is going to be like,
it's got to be 8 times more than that. Or
yeah, it's probably about 8 times more. So you have 3.2 million.
Guess based on like a Pareto distribution or something.
Yeah. So let's just use those numbers. These may not be exact, but by orders of
3.6 million or something.
Yeah, let's just call it 3 million. So you have 3 million businesses that have $10 million of revenue or more, but you still have those same 50,000 analysts. So what are the chances of there being inefficiencies, a higher likeliness of inefficiencies? Is it going to be in that market or in the public markets? The answer.
How do they even get the information around the private ones? A lot of that's hard to get.
No, there is. It's public information. Like, yeah, the SBA has
I gotta
there's
talk to you about how to find that's
oh,
helpful.
it's
Yeah.
really I have it. I can't remember who it is. There's a group that keeps tabs on all this through the census.
That's
So
great.
yeah, the data is out there. So again, you have 3 million companies and 50,000 analysts, or I got 4,000 companies and 50 million. We're much bigger, right? And there's 50,000 analysts. You tell me where there's going to be inefficiencies in the market.
Well, I want to add something to that. I would argue that the psychological undergirding of fraud is self-deceit, which is a base human tendency. Hannah Arendt articulated this in the Eichmann in Jerusalem, how the Holocaust was started. People just look the other way for their own below self-awareness. The reason I bring all that up is I would argue at the lower echelon equity, there's even more self-delusion. And in fact, without that self-delusion, there's less likelihood for someone to say, you know what, let me start this thing. So that creates a tremendous amount of mark-to-market delusion and essentially inefficiency in the equity's potential. So I just I love talking about this stuff.
Are you talking about on the private side or the public side?
Private, small, micro cap, nano cap, under 300 million marked, if it was, smaller companies, essentially, right? That 10 million to 100 million in revenue. I would argue there'd be a higher correlation of self-deceit.
Oh, yeah. That's
probably without that impulse, Nietzsche said, the visionary lies to himself, the liar to everyone else. And so I just want to say, is that in that book that you recommended, by the way, the Alpha one? Because I just looked it up and it looks like an amazing book.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but he's a buddy, so I've talked to him a lot. It's
I'm gonna buy this. We should read this together.
Yeah. Sorry, Better Than Alpha. Is that which one?
Yeah, I just found it on Amazon. Christopher M. Schelling. It just looks really, really well put together. The book.
Yeah, he's literally one of the smartest guys I know in the investing world.
I'm buying it today. So thank you.
Yeah, do they have it on Audible? No, they don't.
I didn't check yet. I just found it on Amazon, but.
I interviewed him on my show.
I totally interjected to affirm, I think I'm in agreement with this idea of the inefficiency, just based on only having the opportunity so far in my career, as well as just general literary pursuits at the smaller level, it's not public. There's less institutionalism. Humans, we're imperfect. We're imperfect organisms. And anyway, so sorry, go. There's inefficiency, there's opportunity, and what's the actual value proposition? I guess in closing, for part one of the private equity culture.
Yeah, so
what's the value proposition?
Well, so you just said it. Actually, it's the potential to take these non-institutionalized firms and institutionalize them in the mid-market. And the process of doing that, there's a ton. That's where there's outsized alpha, right?
Wow.
And so that's essentially what private equity does. Is there's two forms of private equity. One is and the opportunity I see, just to put a bow on it, is that there's nothing new here. Leverage buyouts started 40 years ago, right? Schwartzman is like the king of this, right? And he kind of made that industry, right? These LBO guys in the 80s.
Is that Blackstone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they created that market. And what they did is they went in, they took a bunch of leverage, they bought these companies, and they would essentially roll up a bunch of companies into them. And there's a bigger buyer for that, and they'll pay up for it, right? And they used a bunch of leverage to do so. Private equity has been a financial engineering game for the last 40 years. And there's been a ton of entrants because of the alpha we're talking about, because of the inefficiencies we're talking about. There's been a ton of money coming into the space. All institutions, all bunch of private equity, MBAs, financial engineers, people that are deployers of capital. So you have this huge, so what's happened is the money has become commoditized for the operators. The operator being the $10 million, $100 million company in this inefficient space. So they can go get money, and that's the commodity now. right? Why? Because the money wants to see the alpha we're talking about, and the business wants to grow and they need capital. I believe that there's an opportunity that,
Ooh,
we're calling,
sexy.
we're calling this. So you have two different types of investors: strategic investors and financial investors. Financial investors, we're talking about pretty specifically. A strategic investor is usually an operating company that has a financial investor, public or private, who is the buyer of these smaller companies or investors into these smaller companies for strategic reasons. So an example would be, I have a friend who has a venture capital fund called Trucks, like the vehicle. And he invests in autonomous vehicle technology and a bunch of stuff like that. Couple of his investors are these large strategic investors. And they just want to look under the hood of what's happening. And because he's doing early stage autonomous vehicle investing, the benefit to them is A, he's a good investor, and B, they want the data. They want to know what's happening on
So
the
it's like
ground.
a hedge. Their R&D is hedged with actual return.
That is their R&D. Yeah. Oh yeah,
I love
correct.
that. Genius. I mean, that's sexy.
Yeah, there's a lot of companies, these large
Darius,
companies.
what about this idea? They're because this is just, a guess here. If culturally there's a pursuit of alpha because there's a real disruption occurring in what once worked, and we have, diminishing returns on liquidity, right? Because as the capital base grows, there's diminishing returns of what return one could get. So that's sending all sorts of opportunity towards the P, into the main street, right? I'd like to buy the equities that were bought first round that sold second for meaning I'd like to be at the secondary market to the first acquisition, where the failed ones, meaning there's a percentage of acquisitions that could just be write downs and just garner more fees for whoever the fund that's raising money, like crazy. There's a certain percentage of the deals that are going to go south, right? What if there's like a distressed opportunity, meaning like, I want your feedback on this. I'm thinking if there's a distressed opportunity, let's say the company was bought for 30 million. It thought the PE firm bought them for 30 and they thought they were going to sell them for 100. They end up selling them for 42. But it's really could have been done for 175. It's just that something was missing. And so you get it at 42 and then you get it to 175, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So that kind of goes
Distressed.
back.
Have you seen anything like that? It's distressed PE.
Yeah, there is that right now because you have the secondary market's really big. So there is distressed PE. But it goes to the bigger opportunity. And that's, I think what we're talking about is one sleeve of it right now, which is like, hey, distressed, what do they need? They need operational help, right? So a strategic buyer is not going to give them operational help without taking over their company. A financial buyer doesn't give them any type of help outside of money and maybe a little bit of strategic help. I believe that there's a new category, and this is the company I'm building, which is a synergistic financial partner, which is you're giving them actual operational help and money. So if I'm a $10 million company, who do I want in my corner? I want someone that's built a $100 million company in my space to come in and show me how they did it.
Ooh, that's interesting. That's the cultural way to do it.
Right. And so what we're doing in the wealth management space is we're coming in.
That's the give and take.
Seasoned team and of people that have operators in that space. I'm an operator in an adjacent space. And we're coming in and doing three things. We're offering practice management, operational management, optimization. So think of it like management consulting. So again, we're not doing the work, they're doing the work, but we're coming into these partner firms. We're offering management consulting. We call it practice optimization. We're offering inorganic and organic growth. So on our executive team, we are building an inorganic, which is recruiting and M&A. We have a team people out there creating those opportunities. And then we have a team of people doing organic growth, which is leads, right? So I'm providing marketing opportunities so we could help bring business into them. And then last but not least, we have a tech platform that they can leverage at their, some of it will be required because we need, it's middleware. We need visibility into their business, and essentially a fractional CTO. So if I could get, let's say what I would get if I hired Boston Consulting Group to come in, and I got the guy, the big brother, big sister, who ran who built the last 200 million, 300 million, $500 million company in my space. And I'm the $10 million company that's trying to become the $100 million company. If I could have all those things and capital, then I think you basically differentiate yourself from the financial and strategic buyers, and you add real value. You're in there bleeding with them and sweating with them to grow their business. Side by side, your interests are aligned. And I think that is the future of outsized returns in private equity. So that's what we're doing.